A weather alert and flood watch in effect as another strong storm hits Maryland.
It hits us pretty hard.
We're live in Annapolis with how business owners are trying to limit further damage after Tuesday's storm. And meteorologist Jasmine Lomax is tracking this system as it moves through the state, breaking down how much longer it will last. Tuesday's storm also drawing in thieves trying to steal cars.
I see someone running from my car.
We make this woman's voice heard after her car window was smashed in.
I feel violated.
Former City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby returns to federal court. The disagreements inside the courtroom over her mortgage fraud charges and how long she could spend in prison if convicted.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Fox 45 is on weather alert tonight as storms make their way across Baltimore. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kai Jackson. Days after storms caused flooding in communities across the state, we're now dealing with more rain. This is a look at current conditions in Annapolis, the Inner Harbor, Towson, and our weather radar as well. That rain has many on high alert. In Annapolis, the mayor has declared a state of emergency and anti-flood measures are in place. We have team coverage on the weather alert right now. Vincent Hill is in Annapolis tracking the latest on the flooding threat. But first, let's go to meteorologist Jasmine Lomax with the very latest on what we can expect through the weekend. Jasmine.
Thanks, Kai. We are still keeping a close watch on the system. Notice we're tracking rain across the state. We've got some areas of moderate and even a couple spots with heavy rain. Now, this is going to continue over the next couple hours, but shortly after midnight, the rain is gradually going to start to taper. We will be cooler and breezy for the rest of the weekend, though. Currently, we're seeing wind speeds around 10 to 20 miles per hour, but we have even higher wind gusts. Some areas around 30 miles per hour. North Beach, one of those higher spots. You can expect it to remain breezy tonight and even throughout the day tomorrow, all behind this system. Now, the good news is that the weekend is going to stay mostly dry, but we have a major cool down on the way next week and the potential for snow. Coming up, I'll break down the timing of this system, and I'll let you know what to expect as we head into the rest of the weekend in my full forecast. Back to you.
Jasmine, thank you. And this is a live look right now at the Inner Harbor as rain is falling in Baltimore. I was out a little while ago. The rain is coming down steady. I would say in the areas I was at, which is like northwest Baltimore, wasn't really hard rain, but it was definitely steady. And you can see right now that tide from the Inner Harbor. Well, earlier this week, roads were flooded by severe storms and some residents and businesses sustained severe water damage. Annapolis is in a state of emergency, as we mentioned, for tonight's storms after devastating flooding this week. Fox 45's Vincent Hill is live. And Vincent, what are you seeing so far?
Yeah, Kyle, well, you mentioned that steady rain, and that's what's going on here. We're on Dock Street, and earlier this week, Tuesday, a lot of these businesses along Dock Street were actually flooded, and I want to show you why. And a lot of people are probably wondering why I don't have an umbrella on. Well, it's because of the wind. It would do no good. You can see the boat off in the distance. You can see how it's rocking. The winds here are really strong. The water level has actually risen in the last couple of hours since we've been out here. And of course, earlier this week, all of this water came over the wall here into those businesses. We talked to business owners earlier today who said they had up to a foot of water inside their business. Now, again, they have sandbags out along most of these businesses. The mayor issuing that state of emergency earlier today to give these business owners some financial relief. And the thing is, Kai, that it can all happen over again. But for now, we're live in Annapolis. Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
All right, Vincent, thank you. And please stay safe out there, Vincent. Wake up tomorrow morning with Fox 45's weather team as we track the storm's movement and the chances of snow. Our meteorologists will be tracking the storm's progress and bring you the very latest. And we'd like to see how that storm is affecting your neighborhood. Scan the QR code here on your screen. That will take you to foxbaltimore.com, where you can upload pictures and videos powered by Stack. Governor Moore is creating a new Center for Gun Violence and Prevention and Intervention. That plan is raising questions about redundancy and how tax dollars are tracked. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost has the story.
The push to address public safety in Maryland from Governor Wes Moore includes 3 bills. None specifically go after juvenile crime, but one proposal.
We will introduce a bill to create a new Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention.
Is sparking debate about what it is and how it will work. Governor Moore says the center will operate out of the health department.
The best way to address gun violence is to prevent it from ever happening in the first place.
But the governor's office already has a $10 million violence intervention and prevention program, launched in 2018 when then-Governor Larry Hogan signed the legislation. So we tried to clarify how Governor Wes Moore plans to move forward.
And would the center that you're pushing for replace the existing program that's already in place?
It wouldn't replace it, it would supplement it.
He says it will look for best practices in Maryland and beyond for finding illegal guns in communities and getting them off the streets. In addition to the new center, the governor says it will help with data coordination.
How are we doing a better job of having intelligence that's going to be both coordinated and shared, but also assessed so we see the trends?
But there are still unanswered questions, especially about how Governor Moore's plan will impact nonprofits in Maryland.
Those who are closest to the problem are the ones who are closest to the solutions. They're just hardly ever at the table, right? So we have to change our posture when it comes to working with community organizations.
But again, that effort is already happening with the existing violence prevention program.
And this could be a massive waste of taxpayer money.
Baltimore City's Safe Streets program gets funding from the state through the existing plan, and Safe Streets has a checkered history, especially with seeing sustained success in all of the areas. And now the FBI bringing attention to the Bel Air Edison site after agents executed a search warrant last year. That site still inactive. Fox 45 News sending questions to Governor Moore's office again Friday, asking, will this new center direct money to nonprofits? If so, how will that money be tracked at the state level and monitored to ensure it's being spent wisely? Will the new center require new funding allocations to be operational? If so, what's the price tag? And under this new center, will it financially support Safe Streets? Meanwhile, Governor Moore is looking to lawmakers to usher his priorities through this session. In Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Fox 45 is waiting for answers to those questions that we sent to Governor Moore's office. Lawmakers are concerned about the operation of juvenile services, a top concern in Annapolis. Some lawmakers say they're frustrated with DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi's leadership. Fox 45 News spoke to Senator Corey McCray of Baltimore, who says he had a working relationship with the former Secretary of DJS.
I would like that same type of relationship with Secretary Schiraldi. I know that I've reached out to him on multiple occasions. Unfortunately, there has been a level of unresponsiveness. I am drafting a bill because one of the things that I'm concerned about is when we have juveniles that's engaged in a fatal shooting or a non-fatal shooting, I want to understand what is the after action. How, if they were under the purview of DJS. If they were under the purview of DJS, I think that the Secretary Schiraldi has the responsibility to be able to communicate. When did his agency make contact? How do we know that retaliation isn't going to exist? How do we know that someone isn't going to continue to come after this young man or young woman that's under their purview? And he should be able to articulate that in a manner that anybody can understand.
Do you feel like that's happening right now?
Obviously, it hasn't happened, which is why I'm introducing the bill called the DJS Transparency Act of 2024.
When can we see that?
I'm pretty sure you'll see it within the next 7 to 10 days.
Well, during our Fox 45 roundtable earlier this week, Baltimore County State's Attorney Scott Schellenberger says Schiraldi deserves some time to turn things around.
We can't wait forever because this is too big an issue that needs to be fixed to be broken for too long. So, you know, I'm willing to take another look at this. We'll come see you again next year this time.
Deal.
And we can have the same questions. But, you know, the person who came into that position last year, you know, if you didn't help the 13-year-old, well, now they're 14. And you got to help them now when they're 14. And if we're still having this conversation when they're 15, well, then we might need to have some other conversations.
Well, the calls for action come as several bills are being drafted that would address the juvenile crisis. Now, State Senators Chris West, Mary Beth Carrozza, and Ron Watson are presenting a new bipartisan plan. One bill would alter the Child Interrogation Protection Act. in so that parents would be allowed to substitute for an attorney's permission for a juvenile to answer questions from law enforcement. Senator West says parents should have more of a say in their kids' contact with the justice system.
Most parents want their kids to get out of trouble, and they'd rather have the kids tell the police the truth and then deal with it back at home as a family than to have the juvenile being advised by some lawyer they've never met and just talk to over the telephone.
Most of Senator West's bills are being referred to the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. That committee is set to hold hearings next week to discuss the juvenile justice system. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be in Annapolis following every step of the legislative session for the next 3 months. You can watch all of her coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com. If you missed the roundtable, that will re-air this Sunday. You can watch it on MyTV Baltimore at 1 p.m., on Fox 45 at 2 p.m., or on the CW at 10 p.m. You can also stream the roundtable in its entirety at foxbaltimore.com or our YouTube page. Former City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby was in federal court today for her final pre-trial hearing. She faces 2 charges of making false statements on a loan application. Fox 45's Jeff Abel was in Greenbelt, Prince George's County, and has a closer look at the takeaways from the hearing.
Well, 2 years after she was indicted and 2 years after she demanded a speedy trial, former state's attorney Marilyn Mosby will be going to trial here in Greenbelt next week, this time on 2 counts of mortgage fraud.
Good afternoon.
Mosby wasn't talking today as she walked into the federal courthouse in Greenbelt for the last hearing before standing trial next week. She's accused of lying on mortgage applications surrounding her purchase of 2 Florida vacation homes. Prosecutors say she failed to disclose a tax lien on one application and on the other vowed not to use the new home as a rental property, but did so anyway. In court today, both sides reviewed jury instructions and both sides disagreed on whether the jury should be allowed to view Mosby's recent divorce settlement with City Council President Nick Mosby. In the settlement, Mosby allegedly takes responsibility for the couple's tax lien, but since the document was filed long after the alleged fraud took place, Assistant U.S. Attorney Aaron Zielinski told the judge that it has no bearing whatsoever on whether the defendant lied on the mortgage application. Mosby's defense team, however, insists it is relevant to the case. The judge has yet to decide. In November, a separate jury convicted Mosby of perjury. She's expected to be sentenced following the conclusion of this second trial. Jury selection in this case now scheduled for Tuesday. The trial expected to open on Thursday. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Fox 45 News will continue to follow this trial as it progresses. You can follow along for the developments on air and online at foxbaltimore.com. Still ahead on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock tonight, Johns Hopkins Hospital is walking back a controversial letter about privilege. Why some are split on the message the hospital was trying to send. Less than 2 weeks into the new year, and we're already getting close to some 200 cars stolen in Baltimore. Frustration from victims who say nothing is changing. Plus, we have continuing coverage on the weather alert that you need to know about tonight. We'll tell you the potential risk for flooding across the state. Johns Hopkins Medicine is apologizing after a controversial email about privilege that singled out groups of people. Fox 45's Jessica Babb takes a closer look at how Johns Hopkins is responding.
Johns Hopkins Medicine is now walking back the internal email that was sent out, saying it doesn't reflect their values.
I think it's an extremely difficult conversation to have.
A difficult conversation about diversity and privilege.
I think it makes Johns Hopkins look bad.
Johns Hopkins Medicine is responding to controversy after this email was sent out, saying people who are white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender, male, Christian, middle class, middle-aged, and English-speaking have privilege or unearned benefits, even if it's invisible to them.
It looks pretty normal to me. Maybe they could have phrased the first couple sentences or like softened it a bit, but it's standard like discussion.
I can see why it sparked some controversies. Could have been worded a little bit differently, but again, it's a very difficult conversation to have regardless.
One of the problems with Johns Hopkins doing this and sending out this memo is that you create an uncomfortability and you stigmatize those who are mentioned as the beneficiaries of privilege. And I think that's a bad idea.
In a statement, a spokesperson from Johns Hopkins Medicine says the January edition of the monthly newsletter from the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Health used language that contradicts the values of Johns Hopkins as an institution. Dr. Sharita Golden, Johns Hopkins Chief Diversity Officer, has sincerely acknowledged the mistake and retracted the language used in the message.
When you claim now, in January of 2024, that there's a critical issue of discrimination against all people except those who are white and heterosexual and cisgender, I think you communicate a message that is it's out of touch with reality.
In a message, Golden says the intent of the newsletter was to inform and support an inclusive community, but the language used didn't meet that goal, saying it was overly simplistic and poorly worded, being exclusionary and hurtful to members of the community.
It's not really a matter of pointing fingers and like you're bad and damned because you have privilege. It's more so like being cognizant of the ways we have advantage over others.
Golden said moving forward, she will work to ensure future messages meet their organizational values. Jessica Baum, Fox 45 News.
Congressman Andy Harris is reacting to the controversy, calling on Hopkins to fire the individual. In a statement, the congressman said in part, quote, "This kind of woke discrimination has no place in modern healthcare and science. This blatant discriminatory sentiment is contrary to all the principles held dear in America and certainly not expected from an institution that receives hundreds of millions of dollars in funding from the federal government, including dollars to fund that Office of Chief Diversity Officer. The only appropriate action on the part of Johns Hopkins Medicine is to fire that individual immediately."
With the nation's debt at over $34 trillion, critics are urging presidential candidates to prioritize this issue on the campaign trail. I'm Janae Bowens in Washington with more.
Less than 2 weeks into the new year, and already there have been more than 170 car thefts. The cry for change from victims who say the city isn't doing enough to protect their property.
And I'm tracking rain across the state as we continue to deal with our latest weather maker. Not only is it leading to rain, but we're seeing some areas with gusty winds around the state, and the rain's going to taper over the next few hours, but the gusty winds stay throughout the weekend. Coming up, I'll have a closer look at when the rain ends and what to expect into the upcoming week in my Weather Authority forecast.
All right, Fox 45 is on weather alert as we've been telling you. And let's take a live look at Fells Point right now. This is the rain and water that meteorologist Jasmine Lomax has been telling us about. That water, the tide, of course, is up right now. We are seeing that rain coming down steady. We're not hearing any severe reports of flooding, but if you do know of any, we ask that you call us here at Fox 45. We'd like to see it, and we certainly would like to show it to the rest of our viewers. We'll have more on cleanup efforts going on in Baltimore and Annapolis coming up a little later. The United States has carried out another series of strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen just a day after launching an attack on nearly 30 targets. Now, these strikes come as President Biden says he believes the Houthis and Iran got the message that further violence won't be tolerated.
We will make sure that we respond to the Houthis as they continue this outrageous behavior, along with our allies.
Well, yesterday, a joint attack from the U.S. and Britain on the militant group killed at least 6 people, the United States says. The Iranian-backed Houthis have been targeting ships in the Red Sea. President Biden doesn't believe there were any civilian casualties in the U.S. strikes. The United States has more than $34 trillion in debt. Critics say reducing that bill needs to be a bigger focus of the presidential election. National correspondent Janae Bowens breaks down the numbers.
Hello, Iowans. As the 2024 primary season kicks off in just a few days, the issue of the national debt isn't a huge focus on the campaign trail.
Our Republicans did this to us, too.
We've heard presidential candidates like Nikki Haley use it to criticize her opponents.
Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt.
But some economists say there needs to be a whole lot more discussion on how the next president is going to tackle the country's $34 trillion national debt.
The United States is reaching a point we've never reached in our history, with government debt reaching over 100% of the size of the economy.
According to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, the more than $34 trillion of debt amounts to $259,000 per American household.
The skyrocketing national debt has been an issue for a while now. Now, just 20 years ago, that debt was at $7 trillion. That's a long way away from what we're seeing today at over $34 trillion.
It's like a crazy ant in the basement. Everybody knows she's there, but nobody talks about her.
Back in 1992, Ross Perot's presidential run focused on reducing the national debt.
We are looking on the edge of a revolution of young people who are starting to realize that we, our generation, have put them $4 trillion in debt, and they don't like it, and they shouldn't.
Chris Edwards, an economist with the Cato Institute, says when the next president enters office in 2025, the federal government will be raising $5 trillion in taxes, but spending $6.6 trillion, or 32% more.
I think the politicians, to be prudent, we want them to be prudent. They need to deal with the debt and deficit before it implodes and damages the standard of living of millions of American families.
It's an important issue. Edwards says presidential candidates from both parties should be putting out plans to deal with. In Washington, I'm Janae Bowens.
That brings us to our national question of the day. Are elected politicians doing enough to control the national debt? So far, 98% of those who voted say no. You can make your voice heard by going to foxbaltimore.com and clicking on the Pulse tab.
You least expect it. Everyday people can become heroes.
A documentary airing this weekend gives a glimpse inside a terrifying time in Maryland history, the Capitol Gazette murders and the heroes of 888. We'll give you a look coming up next.
Republican presidential candidates now have just a matter of days to win over Iowa voters. I'm Atrell Nashar with a look at what they're up against.
We are on weather alert tonight as we continue to track the storm system that's bringing wind and rain to our area. Right now, you're taking a live look at Fells Point. That's on the left side of your screen. And on the right side, you can see that fog out at the Inner Harbor and around the city. In fact, on the left side, that's fog. And as you look straight ahead, that purple, well, that's M&T Bank Stadium. Oh, no, that's not. That's Anthem Park, right? Anthem House right there. I saw the purple and I thought it was a stadium, but that is the fog rolling into Baltimore from this rain system that we have tonight.
Where's my car? I'm clicking it and maybe I put it somewhere else.
I did all these preventions so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen.
Less than 2 weeks into the new year, and already there have been nearly 180 car thefts and about a dozen carjackings across Baltimore, according to the latest city crime data. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell talked to the victims and has more on some of the latest cases here in the city.
In 2023, there was a dramatic rise in auto thefts across Baltimore City. The crime now seeping into 2024. Some of the latest victims out of Fells Point. As heavy rain flooded neighborhood streets and strong winds swept through the city last Tuesday, criminals were targeting cars parked here in Fells Point. Here, images of two of those cars, both with windows smashed and filled with shattered glass. One had been hot-wired, abandoned, and left running in the middle of Thames Street. The other car belonged to Phyllis Rush.
I feel violated. You know, I'm sure everybody feels violated.
Rush works in Fells Point and says she heard another car's alarm going off, then minutes later, her own.
As soon as I heard it, I look out the window and I see someone running from my car. So I yell over to my boss, somebody's trying to steal my car. I open my window and I was trying to put my cell phone on so I could videotape them. And then I could see that same red car just that I saw a few minutes earlier was like the getaway car.
The cars, she believes, targeted by the same group of people. According to BPD's latest online statistics, there have been at least 172 car thefts. That includes attempts reported across the city so far this year. That's about 14 cars each day. The number of carjackings sitting at around 14, at least one each day. The dramatic spike in auto thefts seemingly carrying into 2024.
Where's my car? I'm clicking it and maybe I put it somewhere else.
In 2023, cars were being targeted at an alarming rate, the city experiencing a 200% increase in the crime compared to 2022.
It's a serious public safety hazard because these cars they're stolen. Usually it's juveniles that are doing it.
Then the city calling it a nationwide problem and largely blaming viral videos on TikTok that taught juveniles how to hotwire Hyundais and Kias using just a USB cable. The mayor joining a lawsuit against these vehicle manufacturers, and throughout the year, alongside BPD, distributing wheel locks. But the problem persisted, and in many of these cases, the juveniles were then using the stolen car to commit other crimes, or if caught, right back out on the street.
There's 30 young people alone that have been arrested multiple times for carjackings and stolen autos.
As for Rush, she says just 2 months ago, she had the safety feature upgrade installed in her Hyundai. That not enough to keep her car from being targeted.
I did all these preventions so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen. And, you know, in Fells Point, you know, it's a pretty safe neighborhood and there's lots of people out all the time and people walking their dogs, people over at the park with their kids. You know, there's always, it's busy. And who would have thought on a horrible storm day that these punks would have been out?
Rush now dealing with the financial headache that comes with filing a claim, meeting a deductible, and getting a rental car. She says she has since gotten a club in hopes of serving as a more visual deterrent. No arrests have been made. In Baltimore, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
A homicide investigation leads to a police chase through Baltimore today. According to police, just after 4, officers responded to a reported shooting near Washington Boulevard. At the scene, officers found a man with several gunshot wounds. He later died at a hospital. While investigating, officers saw a vehicle drive off. And officers chased that vehicle through South Baltimore, eventually leading to a crash on 295. This is some of that aftermath right here. Police are questioning the passengers in that car. While in pursuit, 2 city police vehicles crashed. Video from the scene shows one of the cars hit the driver's side of another vehicle during that chase. Baltimore City fire officials are investigating after a vacant house fire in South Baltimore. According to the department, it happened around 5:30 this evening near Brooklyn Avenue. No one was hurt, but authorities are looking into the cause. Well, this summer will mark 6 years since a gunman murdered 5 journalists at the Capital Gazette newspaper in Annapolis. It was a mass shooting that made international headlines. And now that story is surfacing again as an hour-long documentary about that fateful day is set to be released this weekend. Fox 45's Amy Simpson sat down with the team behind this sobering production.
It was very painstaking, very emotional.
That day is cemented in Ron Bateman's mind.
I was literally sitting in my office talking to one of my canine officers when the tone came out.
In June 2018, he was the sheriff in Anne Arundel County. The day Wendy Winters, Rob Hyacinth, Rebecca Smith, Gerald Fishman, and John McNamara were killed at the Capital Gazette in Annapolis.
When you least expect it, everyday people can become heroes. This is the untold story of the Capital Gazette murders and the heroes of 888.
After retiring from law enforcement,
And we spent hundreds of hours.
Bateman says he turned to writing crime fiction novels before being approached about another idea.
When I was at the Heroes Pub in Annapolis, of all places, Heroes Pub.
Someone suggested he write a book about what happened on that tragic summer day in 2018.
I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hire a film company and I'm going to produce and direct a film documentary.
And that's how Heroes of 888 was born. Bateman says he studied documentary filmmaking and filed public records requests to gather information, pictures, and video from the tragedy.
We use real footage, real body cams from police officers and deputy sheriffs, real surveillance footage from within inside the building.
Telling Fox 45 News it was an emotional process.
So we wanted to make this informative, and to do so, we knew we needed to show content that has never been seen before by anyone except for the people that attended the trial.
Audio of the calls for help, a sobering reminder of what unfolded.
Where do you need the police? 888 Bestgate Road.
A miniature model of the newsroom.
The shooter continued his rampage.
Also used to explain how the attack happened in real time.
And proceeded to a desk to initiate his surrender.
The film's producer and editor says he was tracking news tips that June day for the community breaking news page, Anne Arundel First Alert.
At first, it was 888 Bestgate Road. It probably wasn't 5-10 minutes later, it actually came back and said, no, this is at the Capital Gazette building. Oh, okay, that's a big difference.
Describing this project as humbling and coming with a great deal of responsibility.
Our documentary tells the story from beginning until the memorial was created and everything in between. And that's a big story to tell.
The team says it conducted more than 30 interviews, sharing voices of survivors and family of those killed.
No one was surprised in our family that she sacrificed herself. I think we all just maybe wish that she had been able to survive her wounds somehow.
Plus perspective from some of the countless first responders that day.
The employee texted me that he said, help, shooting at office.
We were doing at least 80. I remember my vehicle, I was in a Charger.
Deciding the documentary would never show the face or use the full name of the man responsible for the murders.
We didn't want to give this person any notoriety whatsoever.
But Bateman is also aware that some remain adamant this footage shouldn't be made public. Voices outspoken online after a trailer for the project was released last year.
Those who I did get pushback from, it's I think really because they were so close to these people.
Ultimately, Bateman standing by his goal for the story to be factual and authentic.
My research showing documentaries, it is real footage that is shown.
And as this project will soon be released publicly, those behind the scenes say they hope it serves as a reminder.
The press is not the enemy of the people.
And memorial.
So we can get it out there for the world to see, to educate the public and to showcase the heroes of 888 that day.
Amy Simpson, Fox 45 News.
You can watch Heroes of 888 tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on the CW Baltimore. In just over a month, the Baltimore City Council will begin hearings on the $500 million redevelopment of Harbor Place. However, tonight, there are new voices emerging opposing the plan that's on the table. That group calls itself the Inner Harbor Coalition and says they have multiple concerns with redevelopment, including the new high-rise apartments and offices that would be built around the harbor. The coalition says it's considering pursuing an alternative referendum for city voters to weigh in on the issue or even possibly take legal action.
All of us were shocked by this monstrosity of a project that we had no idea was coming down the pike. One goal is slow down the process. Don't railroad it. Don't steamroll it. Step back. Think about it. Think about what we're doing, because this is too important for the future of Baltimore City.
Well, one of the developers for the new Harbor Place project, David Bramble, responded to the opposition today, writing in a statement, quote, "Ultimately, the people of Baltimore will have a vote in November on whether they agree with our vision or not. Competing ballot questions don't change that fact." The mayor also responded tonight, saying it is understandable that the people want their voices heard and the city will provide opportunities for community input on the plan. He also criticized the groups pushing back on the plan, saying they are not providing a viable alternative to improve Harbor Place and that they lack the vision to improve it.